I don't know if this is a controversial opinion to have in 2025, but I really don't care about Saturday Night Live. Maybe I haven't seen the best sketches or the good cast, but anytime I watch it, I just get this guttural feeling of indifference. I don't hate it, I don't like it, it just exists. The only thing I've ever really cared about are the musical guests, because over the show's 50-year history, they've gotten some interesting people to play. Oh, there's a whole documentary about it. I'm gonna watch it after this and give it a scathing letterbox review. But what happens when an artist pushes the envelope? Like they say or do something SNL really doesn't want them to say or do. The Replacements getting drunk during one of their songs, Sinead O'Connor ripping a picture of Pope John Paul II. This has caused them to get permanently banned from the show. And there's a lot of artists on that list. Some for good reason, but most of the time, SNL kinda did it to themselves. So today, let's check out some of the infamous banned bands of SNL. Only rules? No, there are no rules. What are you, crazy? Hold on, I'm getting a spam call.
Hello, may I speak to Dolly?
Did you know that they named the Bowie knife after David Bowie?
You're not Dolly?
No, that's not important. Did you know that they named the Bowie knife after David Bowie? He was scheduled to be the musical guest for an episode in February 1997, but he also wanted to be in a sketch too. Since he was pals with series creator Lorne Michaels, Bowie got just what he wanted. Only problem, he didn't like the sketch. The whole thing was him doing an ad for a Brooklyn bakery with a rendition of his song Watch That Man called Try Our Flan. Bowie apparently had an issue with how they wanted him to pronounce flan since he had to do it in a Brooklyn accent or some shit, I don't know. I feel most functioning people wouldn't give a shit about this, but according to Lorne, Bowie takes food very seriously, so this caused some issues. In fact, it caused so many issues, the only logical thing Bowie could do was intentionally piss off Lorne. Originally, Bowie was gonna play Tellin' Lies as his second song for the show, but changed it at the last second to Scary Monsters, knowing the song was traumatic for Lorne. From what I read, Lorne listened to the Scary Monsters album a lot during his hiatus from SNL in the early 80s, a time he called a very dark period of his life. If you can imagine, Lorne wasn't too happy. Bowie was immediately taken off set, which stung twice as bad because they left him a fruit basket in his dressing room. Sadly, he never got it, much to his dismay. This one puts me in a tough spot. On one hand, yeah, it was a dick move of Bowie, but at the same time, the performance is really good, especially if you consider they probably pulled this out of their ass without practicing. If you're gonna bully someone, at least be creative about it. Bowie put effort into being a dick, damn it. The band didn't last though. Bowie was the musical guest again in 1999. Like I said, he and Lorne were really tight, so they made up pretty fast. Thankfully, this story had a happy ending, but this is the last time you're gonna hear the word unbanned in this video. Everyone from here on out hasn't been on since. Next, we got Cypress Hill. These guys were on the show in October 1993, the same year their album Black Sunday came out, which really put them on the map. So if you can imagine, SNL was quick to have them on. Unfortunately, things didn't go too well. Before the show, Cypress was told they couldn't smoke weed while on set, which, if you don't know, that's like telling a fish not to swim. These guys love weed, and no scummy producer is gonna take that away from them. So in response, they hatched a plan to smoke joints during their set. Originally, they were all gonna light up at the end and trash their shit, but DJ Muggs was a little too excited and lit up during the intro. Because of this, no one else could join in on time, but in retrospect, Cypress felt this was better than the original plan. This, of course, got them banned on the spot, but really that didn't matter to them because they genuinely didn't care. Cypress felt the energy of the performance would have been off if they did. Plus, who else, besides everyone else in this video, has the honor of saying they've been banned from Saturday Night Live, especially after killing the performance. Shout out to the dude on the conga drums. And another thing, what was SNL expecting having him on? Cypress has always been known for their love of weed. They have a song called Hits from the Bong, for Pete's sake. You're gonna hear me say that a lot in this video, but if you get a musical guest that's notoriously pro-weed or really has a strong stance on anything, don't be surprised when they express said stance. Especially when, you give them a platform as big as Saturday Night Live. A couple years ago, Cypress was interviewed about the performance. They said they'd be more than happy to return if the ban was lifted, but would do the exact same thing again. Also, B-Real said despite the ban, the episode with their performance was one of the most reran episodes at the time, so clearly their stunt paid off, I guess. I don't know. It's crazy to think there was a time where late shows had rock bands on pretty regularly. Well, I say a time, and this was almost 20 years ago, but who cares? Next subject is System of a Down. They were on in May 2005 with Johnny Knoxville hosting. I don't have a joke for that, but it feels oddly fitting. For their first song, they went with BYOB in protest to the Iraq War, and despite the song's subject matter and explicit lyrics, SNL allowed them to play it. On the condition it was censored. Because of all the times they say fuck in the bridge, a 5-second delay was added to cut them out. The band was definitely not a fan of this, but they went ahead with the performance, and to give them credit, they still killed it despite the censor. But as a little act of defiance, or just getting lost in the music, Darren at the very end lets out an unscripted fuck yeah. This one isn't in the original song, so the control room had no time to censor it since, they weren't expecting it. I don't want to imagine how stressful that job must be, but it's honestly poetic SOAD was able to slip one in at the very last second. Someone probably got fired for this, but it was worth it. Thankfully, they were allowed to play their second song for the show, Aerials, but were banned after the show. And I know you're not supposed to swear on TV. But again, what was SNL expecting? SOAD has always been known for pushing the envelope, especially with injustice. This wasn't out of the blue for them, so really all SNL can do is plead ignorant. Artists are gonna do what they're gonna do. I actually found an interview with Serge where he talks about the performance and all the stupid expectations the show had.
When you're an artist and you do what you do, and then they change your environment and say, do what you do with cameras on and all of that, you're still gonna do what you do. When you're feeling it,
I doubt SOAD will ever get unbanned or really do any other late night appearances. Especially now that we live in an age where kids cry seeing Knock Loose on Jimmy Kimmel, which is still one of the funniest things of all time, no matter what anyone says. But hey, at least they went out with I want y'all to repeat after me. Rage Against the Machine is a political band. That's not a hot take or my interpretation, no, that is a factual statement. But apparently some people never got that memo. One of those people being Saturday Night Live, seeing as how they booked them as the musical guest the same night Steve Forbes was hosting, the billionaire publisher running in the 1996 Republican primaries. This guy is a walking amalgamation of everything Rage rages against. Even though I just said SNL was oblivious, there's no way not one single person on that cast, crew, whatever said, hey, maybe this isn't the best pairing for the show. Hell, even the band thought it was suspicious. Whether intentional or not, Rage decided to do something about it. Their plan was to hang American flags upside down during their performance as an act of protest. But right before they started, crew members rushed the stage and pulled the flags down. Rage had no time to react either. Literally the second the crew was off stage, Rage had to start playing. And you can tell that really pissed them off. Sadly, they only got to play one song before they were kicked off. But not before Tim Comerford tore up one of the flags and threw it at Forbes' lackeys. Once again, I gotta ask, what was SNL expecting? They get one of the most political bands ever to play the same night a scummy rich dude is hosting. This had to be a psyop or something. Someone wanted to watch the world burn that night. Tom Morello made a statement a few days later about the performance, calling the showrunners cowards and puppets to their corporate overlords, all the buzzwords he loves using. But SNL's response was a little different. Some claim Rage did this just for attention, while people like Lorne Michaels were a little more positive about the thing, stating, "We really enjoyed having Rage Against the Machine on our show." Out of all the performances I'm talking about, this one is definitely the most infamous. The time punk band Fear was the musical guest on Halloween 1981. There's tons of great videos that go way more in depth about the whole thing, but for now, I'll give you the spark notes. Fear was booked per request of longtime SNL cast member John Belushi. He was a huge fan of the band and felt they'd be great for the Halloween special to make it as authentically punk as possible. At the time, Fear wasn't that well known. They had no distribution, a mild following, and a record deal with Slash magazine, so it's safe to assume SNL didn't know what they were getting into. Belushi wasn't even on the show anymore, but he still convinced the producers to have him on, and the end result? It's one of the funniest things I've seen in my life. Before the show, Fear brought in dozens of allegedly drunk fans to slam dance during their performance, and they actually got some pretty noteworthy people to show. Ian MacKaye from Fugazi, Harley Flanagan from Cro-Mags, and John Brannon from Negative Approach. Too bad things got out of hand fast. People were jumping all over the place, the band was barely able to play at times, and at one point someone in the crowd stole a mic and screamed nasty language into it. It got so bad the show ended early so no one would get hurt, or worse, destroy the set. And if you can imagine, Fear never returned. But here's the crazy thing, despite this performance being considered a disaster, a lot of people reflect on it in a more positive light, with it drawing attention to the world of punk. It may not have all been good attention, but people like Fred Armisen and Jack White have commented about how much this impacted the genre. Fear singer Lee Ving especially credits John Belushi for getting them on in the first place. So despite how genuinely crazy this shit was, Fear's performance, at the very least, shined a light on a genre that was pretty underrepresented and frankly misunderstood by a lot of people back then. It may not have been the most elegant, but it was indeed something. I mean, it's not every day you see people moshing to a dude playing sex, right? For our final band of the night, I thought it'd be fun to look at a musician that wasn't banned for their music, but because they sucked ass as a host. And there's only one man up for the task: Frank Zappa. Frank was scheduled to appear in October 1978. This was actually his second time on the show, as he was also the musical guest back in '76. But this time, it was extra special, as he also doubled as the host that night. And I'm sure Zappa did everything in his power to honor this immense role bestowed on him. Just kidding, he bombed horribly. From the very start of rehearsal, both the cast and crew weren't connecting with him. People thought he was flat, boring, and had an overall asshole-ish vibe. And after watching the episode for myself, I see what they mean. Like, dog, he makes a joke about people using calling cards in his opening monologue, but it comes off as extremely nitpicky and desperate.
And remember, I'm reading this off these cards underneath this camera here. It's an awesome responsibility being selected out of millions of people to become the banner of NBC's new look.
The sketches are even worse. My favorite is the Coneheads one. He constantly breaks character, trips over lines, and seems genuinely directionless. It's like he just read his script once on his way to set the night of the show. What really cements the rumor Zappa was a dick is the show's Good Night segment. This is at the end of every episode, where all the cast and performers come on stage and thank the audience for watching. That wasn't the case for Frank's. He's just standing by himself making snarky comments. Eventually, some of the cast joins him begrudgingly, but you can tell everyone was tired of his shit and didn't want to be there. Biggest problem, obviously, Zappa didn't try at all. I know SNL isn't everyone's cup of tea, but he should have tried to at least have a little fun instead of acting like a smug teenager. Really, the only good thing from this episode was Zappa's music. Him and his band killed it. But even this is marred with cringe. During his first song, Dancin' Fool, he brings a cast member on stage and does this shit.
You're an Italian. You're Jewish? You must be a Libra. Your place or mine. All right, let's go.
Suffice to say, it didn't go well. In fact, some members of SNL dubbed this as one of the worst episodes in the show's history. Many were let down as they were huge fans of Zappa's music but hated working with him. And Frank tried defending himself with a bunch of different excuses. He wasn't used to how the show was run, he didn't know which camera to face, the writers kept changing his lines. There's probably some truth to that, but go ahead and watch the episode for yourself and tell me Frank doesn't give off extremely toxic roommate vibes. I can imagine hosting SNL isn't easy, but goddamn, you don't need to be so dislikable. And that's the funny thing out of all this. Frank didn't get banned for smoking weed or cursing or bringing people into slam dance. It's cause he sucked at hosting, plain and simple. And I know at the end of the day, he's a musician first and whatever the hell you call this second, but there were already a bunch of musicians that doubled as the host before Zappa and did exponentially better. Chris Christopherson, Ray Charles, the Rolling Stones, Simon and Garfunkel. The point is, it can be done. Zappa just sucked. Alright, I'm sick of talking about SNL. Thank y'all for watching. As I've said multiple times, most of these were either a result of SNL's incompetence or just having really stupid expectations for the artists. Sure, some of these guys may have stirred the pot with their shenanigans, but they're artists, that's what they're gonna do. That's probably why the music is so goddamn boring nowadays. Legit, we don't need to see Coldplay and Foo Fighters for the 80 billionth time. Hopefully they acknowledge that in the documentary. I'm gonna crack open a cold seltzer and pirate it right now. I'll see y'all later.
I want to thank Jimmy Fallon for being such a good sport. Lois, Meg, Stewie, Brian, Chris, the guys from the prison, Counting Crows. If I'm forgetting anybody, I'm sorry. Good night, everybody. Our thoughts are with you, Chevy.